You hear a statement like that, and you just know there's a story behind it, a missed connection, a search for a different kind of justice. But where does a sentiment like this even come from? Well, to really get it, we need to go to a very specific place at a very specific time.
So, picture this. Our story doesn't start in some quiet, wood-paneled office. No, it begins right here, a city jail in Lower Manhattan. It's officially the Manhattan Detention Complex, but everyone, and I mean everyone, just calls it the Tombs. It's in this loud, chaotic place that the author of our source material, who was working as a lawyer at the time, met an inmate who called himself Science. Now, Science was in for shoplifting, but within minutes, it was clear he had zero interest in talking about his case. Instead, he just had to share this incredible vision he'd just had. We're talking interplanetary travel, ancient pharaonic gods, these huge galactic struggles. Just, wow. The author was, completely floored by the imagery, but he was on the clock. He had a job to do. So he did what he felt he had to. He steered the conversation right back to the file in his hands, to the irrational matters of the case. And all those powerful symbolic images, they were just left hanging in the air. And you know what? Through the bars of his cell, Science didn't even seem surprised. That moment, that disconnect, that invisible wall that went up between them, that is the absolute heart of what we're digging into today. What was it that prevented that exchange? What system was quietly at work?
And that story, right there, is our doorway into the core of today's source material, a fascinating paper by Alex Sierck. It's all about a concept from Jungian psychoanalysis called analyzability. We're going to deconstruct how this idea, which sounds so clinical and neutral, can actually create these exclusionary borders. And this has huge implications for who gets access to care and really whose inner life is considered valuable in the first place.
All right, Section 1, the gatekeeper of analysis. Let's start with the big question. What exactly is analyzability? Our source material frames it as this incredibly important gatekeeper, the thing that decides who's a good candidate for the really deep psychological work.
Now pay close attention to the language here, an unexamined assumption. Right away, this isn't being presented as some hard scientific fact, but more like a cultural habit within the field. And it all comes down to one thing, a person's supposed ability to think symbolically.
So what is symbolic thinking anyway? Well, it's this ability to see beyond the surface of things, to move from the literal to the metaphorical, to sense a deeper meaning, and to connect with the unconscious. This is seen as the absolute engine of depth analysis. The basic idea is, if you can't do this, you can't really do the work.
And this assumption, well, it creates a really clear divide in how people are treated. On one side, you have Jungian depth analysis. That's the real work, and it's reserved for those who are analyzable. On the other side, everybody else. They get directed to supportive psychotherapy, which is framed as something you do to get ready for analysis. It basically sets up a hierarchy of care right from the get-go.
And here's the absolute kicker. The clinical language, all this talk of capacity and readiness, it sounds so objective, so neutral, but its real-world impact has been anything but. The author argues that it builds a hierarchy that systematically pushes people out, often based on some pretty culturally biased ideas about what symbolic thought is even supposed to look like.
So, you have to ask, was it always this way? Was psychoanalysis born this exclusive? The source argues, absolutely not. This hierarchy isn't baked into the cake. It was built piece by piece through history. And that brings us to Section 2, a genealogy of exclusion.
In its early days, psychoanalysis was deeply tied to social justice. Between the world wars, you had these free clinics popping up all over Europe, serving poor and working-class people. It was a seriously progressive, socially engaged project. But then Nazism rose, and this entire movement was just crushed, decimated. After the war, something totally different took its place, especially in the US, a private, medicalized, fee-for-service system that made the whole practice much, much more exclusive.
And today, that private model is held in place by a whole ecosystem of pressures. Analysts are essentially small business owners, right? They're facing real economic anxieties. Insurance companies, for the most part, don't want to pay for long-term depth work. In a system like that, the author argues a concept like analyzability becomes a really convenient justification for the status quo. It's a way to rationalize the economic reality of it all.
Okay, so we've seen the critique, we've looked at the history. Now, for Section 3, what is really at stake here? And the argument is, it's nothing less than the soul of psychoanalysis itself, its relationship to justice.
To really drive this point home, the author brings in the anarchist psychoanalyst Otto Gross. I mean, what a quote. The psychology of the unconscious is the philosophy of revolution. This suggests that meeting your own unconscious isn't some quiet, neat little affair. It's an intrapsychic insurrection. It's a process that makes us free on the inside, which in turn prepares the ground for change on the outside.
And here's where you see this just beautiful parallel. The work of psychoanalysis, it's all about disrupting our inner order, the fixed, rigid stories we tell ourselves about who we are. And the work of justice, that's about disrupting the outer order, the hierarchies and so-called truths of society. The author's point is that these two projects aren't separate things. They are deeply intertwined, and they feed each other.
Which brings us to the ethical heart of the whole argument, and it's boiled down into one pretty stark question. When we practice psychoanalysis in a way that excludes people, aren't we implicitly saying some souls are more valuable than others? And who on earth gets to make that decision?
So, what's the path forward? Well, the source proposes a pretty radical reorientation. It starts with softening those hard theoretical edges that act like borders. Then it means we have to really examine our own biases about what symbolic thought even looks like. After that, it's about actively looking for wisdom in the very communities that have been shut out. And it's all in service of this one core idea. The unconscious is universal. It belongs to all of us.
And this, of course, brings us right back where we started, back to that noisy cell in the tombs with the man who called himself Science. Because with this new framework, we can finally understand the real lesson of that encounter.
You see, the failure in that cell wasn't Science's. His vision of pharaohs and planets, that wasn't a sign that he was unanalyzable. No, the author now sees it for what it was, a powerful symbolic expression, an invitation that was missed. The encounter wasn't a failure at all. It was a reminder of this radically democratic potential of the psyche that is alive and kicking in everyone, everywhere.
And that's really the ultimate takeaway here. This democratic potential for meaning, it exists in all of us, and it's just yearning to be realized. The work, then, isn't to stand at the gate and decide who's worthy of the journey. The real work is to create the conditions where that journey becomes possible for all.